The saga of Eric the Red and the saga of the Greenlanders both tell the story of the land beyond the waves. It starts with the exploration of Greenland by Eric the Red, who entices other residents of Iceland to join him, but also chronicles the travels of his son Leif, who sails through a storm on the way to Greenland and ends up discovering completely new land. He returns with more Greenlanders who discover a total of 3 countries: Helluland, Markland, and Vinland. Vinland, named so for the wild grapevines present in the area, perfect for winemaking, as well as abundant forests and raw materials, becomes their home. However, conflicts with the people who already live there cause them to leave, abandoning their settlement. These sagas, committed to writing in the 13th and 14th centuries, were long thought to be fiction, but everything changed in 1960. Anne and Helge Ingstad, a married couple, were both archaeologists who had been searching for evidence of Vinland for some years before arriving in Newfoundland in 1960. After reaching Lonsau Meadows, a small village at the northern tip of this island, they were guided by locals to a small, abandoned site with what looked like the foundations of buildings. Over the next few years, they excavated 8 structures, revealing numerous Norse artifacts. It became clear that these sagas, though possibly embellished, recounted a real event: the Norse settlement in North America. It is now estimated that the settlement was founded in 1021 CE, that it was inhabited for anywhere between 20 and 100 years, and that up to 160 people could have lived there, though the actual number was likely lower. As a matter of fact, many of the details mentioned in the sagas could be overlaid onto real life. Conflict with the native inhabitants makes a lot of sense as to why these Vikings, living in Greenland of all places, would leave such a land. Vinland was a sensible name, as grapes for making wine grew in the general area, though further south, suggesting additional exploration carried out by the Norse. Helluland referred to Baffin Island's barren expanses, and Markland likely indicated Labrador Peninsula's wood-covered coast. Markland is where the story gets even more interesting. The knowledge that land lay beyond the shores of Greenland persevered for hundreds of years after Leif Erikson, Eric the Red, and everyone else from the sagas faded into myth. Records from Iceland as late as 1347 mention ships going to Markland for timber, 3 centuries after Norse settlement in Newfoundland. Furthermore, an Italian book about various peoples, lands, and cultures mentioned Markland in 1340, demonstrating the spread of this knowledge across Europe. Unfortunately, after that point, information about Markland stops appearing. A likely contributing factor is the slow demise of the Norse settlements in Greenland. By the early 15th century, there were no Europeans remaining there at all, and it took until the 1700s for Denmark to attempt a new colonization of the island. The Norse were not the only people to come to America before Columbus. Alaska, on the opposite side of the continent, bears signs of trade between America and Asia. In 2011, a belt buckle was found in Cape Esperance. It probably belonged to an Inuit who lived there around 1200 CE, 800 years ago. However, the Inuit did not have the advanced manufacturing technology to make such a buckle, which was made of a bronze alloy and was seemingly made using a mold. So, where was it made? Well, probably China. China has been one of the most advanced, populous, and prosperous regions of the planet for most of human history. They definitely possessed the technology to make this buckle. In fact, the style was identified as being very similar to buckles made in China around this time. It is not surprising that this part of America had contact with Asia at this time. as the width of the Bering Strait separating the two is only 80 kilometers at its narrowest point, and it's so far north that it would likely be covered by solid ice that could be crossed on foot by people. While various Chinese dynasties never extended their control over the entirety of Siberia, it's more than plausible that a trade network between the native Siberian peoples and the Chinese existed, and so the buckle moved along this trade route to get to Alaska. It is, however, not known if anyone in China knew of this different, distant land. While a Chinese journal describes people who lived in the far Siberian north and records that they traded walrus and narwhal ivory with them, it's unclear if they ever realized that this was a different land from the rest of Siberia, as there is significant overlap between Siberian and Alaskan ethnic groups, such as the Yupik, who even today live on both sides of the Bering Strait. Perhaps they were the ones making the journey 800 years ago, but they weren't the only ones who made the journey east to America. The Polynesians are a diverse ethnic group that mainly inhabit islands in the Pacific. Polynesians were great sailors and navigators. They had proficient knowledge of the seas and islands of the Polynesian Triangle, an area defined by Hawaii in the north, New Zealand in the west, and Easter Island in the east. It is a huge expanse of space, with each side of the triangle having a length of around 7,000 kilometers. As such, it's plausible that they could have braved the 3,500-kilometer journey from Easter Island to South America. The evidence for this is hidden in DNA. Scientists detected a distinctly South American haplogroup of genes in the DNA of some Polynesians living on Easter Island. A haplogroup is a set of chromosomes that is usually inherited together when a child is conceived, allowing for identification of broad genetic groups of people. It is how those sites like 23andMe work. This suggests that Polynesians and South Americans shared some quality time together. A potential time frame for this mingling is 1200 to 1400 CE. Further evidence is the pronunciation of sweet potato, which is called kumara in Maori, a Polynesian language, and kumar in Quechan, which is and was spoken by people in many parts of the Incan Empire, which extended to the Pacific coast in modern-day Peru, Ecuador, Chile, and Bolivia. It is admittedly the least likely contact, as genetic evidence can be somewhat uncertain, and many have claimed different results in their investigations of Easter Islander DNA. It is at least somewhat realistic compared to some other theories that have been proposed. There are many claims about people from other lands having visited America before 1492. Most of them are not very serious or realistic. Muslim explorers, Romans, Phoenicians, Irish monks, Welsh princes, Scottish noblemen, Chinese sailors, Japanese Buddhist monks, Indians, Africans, and Christopher Columbus himself are all proposed candidates. Particularly amusing are the myths surrounding the Olmecs. Some have claimed that Olmec culture, which existed in southern Mexico between 1600 and 400 BCE, was influenced by Bronze Age refugees who fled China after the fall of the Shang dynasty, while others claim that West Africans must have been the ones to influence the Olmecs. This is based solely on the appearance of artifacts made by Olmecs. It is not inconceivable that ships from some of these places could have made it to America, swept off course by storms, carried by prevailing winds and currents. The problem with most of these claims are technological. Ships from most of these civilizations simply could not have made it across the ocean. There is also no hard evidence at all in most of these cases. As we have just seen with the Norsemen or the Polynesians, things that actually happened, there are multiple pieces of evidence. There are realistic routes that could have been taken, technologies that could have been used. Most other theories are just nonsense in comparison. Fun nonsense. Nonsense that is worth Googling and learning more about, but that ultimately is nothing more than pseudo-history. That's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, click the like and subscribe buttons and check out some of my other videos.